Welcome to the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Tribal Nations Native Power Hour, a public humanities broadcast. I'm Linda Little Bright Star Jackson, your host, and this is the native voice of Lenapehoking and the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Tribal Nation. I hope that you enjoy this episode. The Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Native Power Hour is proud to welcome Cory Ridgeway. Welcome, Cory.
Thank you for having me.
And Cory, could you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Cory Ridgeway. I'm from the Nanticoke tribe of Delaware. I've been residing here with the Nanticoke Lenape tribe for about 10 to 12 years now. I've been sewing for at least 12 years. I learned from my mom and my aunties, just like most people that I know. But in maybe the last 2 years, 3 years is when I really started to explore my work and start making regalia for other people.
Excellent, very good. Okay, well, you can go ahead and take it away and show us.
Okay, well, today I'm going to be going over applique. There's a lot of people who know how to make aprons and they know how to make shirts and a lot of the bead work, but I found that there's many people, even like really good seamstresses and people who sew from the communities, who are scared to touch applique because they're not quite sure or they haven't quite figured it out. So I was taught by my mom and by Chrissy Perez on how to do applique, and I've just grown. It's my favorite part about doing regalia for people, that design work, it's like the making it more than just the apron and figuring out like the personality and how to put it in. That's my favorite part about making regalia for people. So first things first, the first thing you're going to do when you decide that you want to do applique is draw something out. You want to draw something out on paper. The example I'm using today, I'm going to be doing ribbon work, but this is really just a piece of construction paper that I folded over like this, just like you used to make those little snowflakes in class when you were a kid. Figure out that way it's nice and balanced. And this goes with anything. This goes with whether you're doing flowers, whether you're doing something more detailed like ribbon work, whether you're doing just squares or anything like that. It's like always start on paper. That way you get it exactly the size you want for your aprons or for your shirt or whatever you're deciding that you want to applique on, whether it's ties. That way you can look at everything and say, okay, well, this is the correct size. And you're not wasting fabric and you're not wasting all the raw material that you have, because that gets expensive over time. I've even seen people use newspaper. Whatever you have in your house, go for it. So here's the design I came up with today. The material that I like to use is called Wonder Under. You can get it at Hobby Lobby. You can get it at Walmart. Actually, Verna Street put me onto this. And it's really lightweight, which is what you really want in a regalia. There's a lot of times you see applique that is really hard to move and it's thick and it's heavy. And I really just don't like that for two reasons. One, it looks bulky when you're dancing. Two, it will give your machine a hard time trying to sew through it. So you really want to have as many layers as you can without it being bulky. And it's very easy to use. All you have to do is you draw out your fabric. It's like, so you draw this out, you trace it onto the paper. So literally all you would do, open this up. You say, hey, okay, well, this is my design. And there's two sides. There's a shiny side and then there's an adhesive side. And that side you're going to put down. And you really just take this and you trace it. Whether it's the circle, whatever color you want. You cut it out and then you iron it on to the wrong side of the fabric and cut it out. Simple. And I have an example here that I did last night. And you can see where I did the pencil. And I really just traced the whole thing. And I decided how close I wanted it to be, how far away I wanted it. Now, because this is ribbon work, there's a little bit more to it than just ironing it onto the color that I want. I like to sew the pieces of fabric together first. That way you have a nice little line, and then cut it out. And I make sure that my center line, when I draw it out, it goes right along that line. It's a little tricky when you first start out, but that is definitely more advanced than when I first started out. The first thing I did was a heart, and it was all types of crooked. But the more you practice, the better you get. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the background piece. This is just the background of the rim work. I did the same thing where I sewed it and then decided to iron it on. This is what it looks like with one layer. It really just comes off that easy. And we're going to just, like we had before, you see where I traced it, we're just going to cut it out. And I'm sorry to all my ribbon work purists, this is applique work. This is not real ribbon work. Real ribbon work, they actually take the designs and then they cut and fold and iron and they're hand stitch it. It has a different look. It's definitely more traditional. So if you're going to do ribbon work, I do suggest learning the old way first. I did my first one for Will Mosley, and everybody knows that he is a tall man, and I actually hand stitched his entire outfit from the center line. Every crease, I really did that first because I thought it was really important to learn how to do it first before I did the applique version. Now if you're just doing regular applique, you're just paying attention to your designs, making sure you're not copying anyone else. Obviously, you know not to do that. Get yourself a pair of nice sharp scissors, because if you don't have sharp scissors, it'll actually start to fray on you. Like if you really have to cut in like intricate designs. When you sew, that frayed piece will still show after the fact. So that's why it's really important. Anybody who sews really knows you got to have the sewing scissors. It just makes a huge difference. And when you're doing applique work, you don't want to put all that time and energy in making something that's not going to stand up to the elements in time. Just like they're ready. Now cut, please. Now this only has basically the 2 layers. So when you're doing floral work, you can actually get a lot of different layers. Where you get up to like 5 different layers. I like to try to cut out like the center, that way it's not so bulky. Now this is one of the main steps that I try to get my kids to help me with. Sometimes it's not it. Sometimes they're just not as exact as I would like. But when it's their regalia, I do try to get them to help make things where they help with not just the design work and picking out the fabric, but actually spend the time to put the fringe on like I did when I was a kid. You can imagine the time it would take to do this. This is just for an apron. It's just from, this one's for a man's southern straight, and it's just for his apron. So it's from the hip down to just around the knee. You can imagine how much time it takes to do the piece for the leggings. So yeah, applique work, it does seem like it's a lot. It is very tedious, but none of it is hard. And I really want to stress that. It's something that anybody can do as long as they put the time into it. Here we go. And here's your piece. Now when I'm looking at this, this is the time to really check it over. And that's when I'm like, okay, are all these pieces even? Well, I can look at this piece right here compared to this piece. It's not even with all the checks and balances that I did. So this is when I really try to freestyle a little bit and try to make sure that it looks nice and matches. If you wait till later, you won't always catch it. So usually I try to do it now before I iron it on. All right, so that's fixed enough. Let me double check this other one. There we go. And I had this other piece that I cut out last night as well. I'm going to check that over, make sure it's balanced. All right. Now we're going to go back to our underneath piece. I usually will iron this flat. And just remember, once you iron it on, that's it. You can try to scrape it off, but this stuff is so thin that it's really hard to once you pass that point. So just like before, all I really do is I just peel the piece off. If it doesn't come off well, or you notice that the sticky part's not on there, just put it back down and re-iron it and give it a second. It could mean that your iron's just not hot enough. Come on, you can do it. And that's why you give it a second, because if it's too hot, it doesn't want to come off. So I do this piece. And now this, I like to save these. That way you can put it with all the other designs that you've done. That way you know what you've done in the past and who you did it for, and if they need another piece or something gets messed up, it's all taken care of. Now I'm going to remember that the black goes on the yellow, and I'm going to line this up with this line going to this line. Oh, I see a little tiny mistake. Nothing's perfect. Sometimes you iron it a little funky. And that's one of the really cool parts about doing it by hand. And when you fold it over, you're like, oh, well, that's not right. You can fix it right on the spot as you're doing it. Here we go. We're going to make sure she's nice and centered. Line up the lines on it. And just remember, don't take out the bottom pieces or it's going to mess up everything underneath and you won't be able to use it. Again, I'm going to go like this. Iron it all on. Make sure this stays nice and flat. Go. And when you're doing like applique work that's not ribbon work or applique ribbon work, and you're just doing like floral or any of the geometrics, you can really just, when you put your pieces together, it'll be really easy. You just go down the line because you already know you need 8 of these pieces for the shawl and for the leggings. You're going to need to cut out one that's a little bit different to fit on your moccasins. Like as you work on more things over time, you'll learn that once you find find the thing that you want to do, then it becomes easier to know the steps of what comes next. Simple. I'm going to do one more. I'm going to iron this. It does like the curl. Iron on. this other piece. Now that it's cooled off. I also have a million little pieces of this all over my sewing room floor by the time I'm done doing my applique day. And black on yellow. Make sure this is all nice and straight. And if there's any time in between when you decide to iron everything on and sew, you can always just iron it on really fast. Like give it just, even if it's on low heat, right before you sew it. I don't know why it works. I think it's just maybe something with the glue, but it always seems to sew a little bit cleaner if it's not hot, but just cool to the touch, where it's not going to come off, where it's not going to fold on you. And there you go. You got your two pieces ready to sew. Next off is sewing. So I'm going to scoot this over. It's funny, I can just roll right on over. Make sure your iron is away from your stuff. I always have my iron on. My kids know that's the area you don't go near. I'm going to scoot over this way. Do one to start with. Actually, this might. Right, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to your zigzag stitch. I like to keep the tightness around 5 if I'm doing something really, really like close together, like I need to have another color on top of it. Like if I have a blue fabric and I want like an orange stitch, I'm going to keep it around 4 or 5 just for my particular machine. This one I'm going to keep the same color so I can actually do it a little bit looser. Now, I almost forgot. One of the other people who taught me how to do applique, her name was Barbara Miller. She was out of Nanticoke down in Millsboro. And she really showed me the basics of how to hit these corners or how to do curves. She always told me outside edge, outside needle, inside edge, inside needle. So what you're going to do, here's your zigzag, right? This is that one side, and it's going to go to the other side. So you want to, this is an outside edge. So you're going to start with your needle on the outside. I do recommend getting yourself a clear pressure foot. It makes being able to see everything a lot easier. Now this is what I would consider an inside edge because it kind of goes like this. So you're going to stop with your needle on the inside. I'm going to turn it. And I'm really just gliding that outside edge right on the outside of this. If it's too far over, you're going to see the white. Too far this way, you're not going to catch the fabric. And I'm going to stop right as I go over that edge. And this is the outside edge. This is on the outside, so your needle's going to stop from the outside. So what I like to do is I like to turn it and make sure that the machine stitch going this way matches the line. And that's how you get a clean edge versus one where you see it kind of cross. Inside. Inside. And you really just run your stitches like you're drawing over the edge. Now I know I do this a little fast, but I've also found that if I'm sewing slow, my machine doesn't like it as much. So I've gotten really used to sewing with it all the way fast. So when you come up to this point, when I first started out, you're gonna say, well, is this an inside or outside? Is this an inside or an outside? So really, the only way you can really get used to it is just to try. So this is what is an outside. Match that line up. So when you do that, it's right there, right where I want it to be. And when you're starting out with this, I always recommend geometrics. I know that we're Eastern Tribe, we do a lot of florals, but get used to the process first before you start going into a lot of curved lines, because that is a bit harder. You have to be more meticulous. You're going around a curve, you do like 4 stitches, you stop, adjust, 4 stitches, stop, adjust, 4 stitches, stop, adjust. So keep that in mind when you're designing your stuff. Practice making some other things first with your geometrics. I have friends who've been sewing for a couple years and they still will not touch things like flowers and a whole mess of curvy lines. And you can see here where, even with all my carefulness, it's fraying just a little bit on this inside. So I like to push that up, try to keep it nice. And when you look at the spot later, it's nice and clean. Here I'm just kissing the outside. Ask yourself, this an inside needle or an outside needle? Inside. And this is one of the times where, remember how earlier I said if it doesn't match quite nicely and you like don't notice it beforehand, how you would finagle this is, say this one looks the same, But if I wanted to make it a little bit longer, I would tighten my stitch. And I'll go like this, tighten it. And that way you kind of draw it in a thick line of where you accidentally messed up at. You see where I messed up just a little bit right here. But we're just going to go over that. Luckily enough, I already know that I'm going to be folding this part over and stitching it down like that on the actual apron, so it's not that big of a deal. So here's an example of straight geometric applique work. Again, I like to always use a different color underneath. Anybody who's gotten a regalia from me knows they can look underneath and it could be pink, it could be blue, it could be red. And at 99.9% of the time, it does not match the top color. I do that because if my machine is running funny, it'll let me know. So if I start seeing like the edges turn pink in here, or in this case, the edges start to turn blue, I know that my machine's not quite doing what it needs to do. Because sewing machines, sometimes they run perfect. If you have an older machine, they usually always run nice. But every once in a while, you get a fabric or something's going on and you don't know exactly what it is. And that'll let you know right from the jump what's happening. So you say, oh, well, it's pulling up from the bottom. I need to adjust my tension or whatever the issue is. That's why you will always see me use a different color underneath. It just lets me know that my machine is sewing correctly and nice and clean. Another example for you, I'll do a little bit of a curved applique work. I'll use the red I have over here. Over here. And here's a piece that I had drawn up. I cut it all out. I put it together. I put it on the legging, and I said, nope, I don't like it for that specific person. So I ended up I actually had 3 of these that I cut out and put all together. One of them I used for my daughter's kindergarten graduation ribbon skirt. And these are just some of the extra ones that I have no idea what I'm going to do with in the meantime. But the original design is going to have green going up here, acting like it's going around, and it'll be centered, and I'll put like a little loop through there. But curved lines are always a little bit different. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how I do that. I think I'm going to actually do this part in red today. A self-threader is the best thing they could have done. So for this, I'm going to make the stitching a little bit tighter. I'm going to make it a little bit thinner just because of how tight all this is. Especially if I was if I was to go on this orange with the red, you would really want this to be tight so you can actually see the color going through. Circles are always fun. They are hard. Even for me to this day, I had to take my time and remind myself to take my time while I'm doing it. So here we go. So again, start on the outside. This is not on the outside. Come on. There she is. And start here. Now you can go up, like most people who sew, they're going to go up, they're going to back stitch. You don't really have to do that with this, mostly because one, I have an extra long line underneath of it. I can even have it here. And when you're all done with your applique, I can show you on this one too. I like to take my seam ripper and pull this lat stitch out. Oh, it's really hard to see. And it's hard to do without a seam ripper. So you can see where I take, this is the underneath black, another reason why you have separate colors. And I take this out and I pull it underneath. So when I take everything off and I glue it on, guess what? This stitch is locked in place from underneath. So you don't never have to worry about a piece of string from up here fraying out or being odd. It's all tucked in and nice and clean. I know even people who take these two and they're not every single time that they have to change threads. I'm a little too lazy for that, but I do make sure that the glue is there. And again, most of the time when you're dealing with curves, you're always going to stop on the outside. And you kind of dance around the edge. You can see I use definitely a thicker stitch. That way you can really see the color. You see this curve is coming up. So you kind of want to, when you first start out, you're really going to just take this easy until you get used to going around. And I'll back stitch. See a little bit of glue that came up from underneath. It happens. Make sure you remove it before you use an iron on it though, because it will go on your iron. Here's this. Here's your nice clean stitch. Flip this over. Pull this out. Trim it. And ta-da! Look how nice and clean. I'm going to show you how to do this circle one time. It is difficult. Take your time. So whenever you see someone with a lot of curves and lots of applique, really take a good look at it. Ask them who did their regalia. Or you could not do that. There we go. Because you'll be surprised sometimes by how unclean some things are. Tell you the truth. Again, I am pretty much a perfectionist. Now I know that I'm supposed to start on the outside, but I also have a good idea of how wide that is just because I've been doing it so long. So here's how slow we're going to do this. We're actually going to tighten it up. And yes, that's really how slow I sew it. And this underneath fabric is very soft and frail. That's where the sharp needle comes in handy. If you don't have any Microtex, you can use your universal ones. Just make sure you get a new one out of your box. It really does make a difference. So if you're ever wondering why it takes so long to do applique, this is it. You see me just slowly going around, following that outside edge. Outside edge is the one that I'm worried about the most. And I will back it up a little bit. And there's your clean. Now these are an example of a pair of cuffs that I made. Take this back a little bit. You can see that I'm using different colors sometimes on different color fabrics. I play around with ribbon. You can put ribbon in there. Now the main back piece that I used was this orange right here. This was the shape that I cut out. All the rest of this are just pieces. So this was just a square underneath. This was the hourglass shape that I cut out. This is what shape. Literally this alone was a shape that I cut out. And so you start doing that, it's like, well, I think I cut out about 16 of each of these. And then I like to play around with a lot of your machine settings. You can have some really, that one's a little wonky, but you can have a lot of fun with trying to get this, like these fun stitching. And don't be afraid to play with different colors, because that's the whole point of doing applique. I still need to burn the edges, but, and you see where sometimes I didn't pull it through, which happens sometimes when you're in a rush trying to make regalia. If this does happen to you and you forget, like I did really well on the other side, but of course I forgot on this side. I like to just take a lighter and lightly, don't burn off all the work that you did, please don't, but I'll just take a lighter and burn a little bit of this off. That way it stays nice and clean and you don't have to worry about seeing this as you're dancing or have this catch on anything, especially if you have a fabric that's kind of like it has like the glitter or the sequence, or you rub up against something. It's not going to give you any issues in the future, because after all this time you're going to want it to last a few years, and that's how you make sure that it lasts as long as you need it to.
Cory, that was excellent. Next time I go to powwow and I see a regalia with applique, I'm really going to respect how the time that it takes and the talent to do all that work. It's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I knew it was a lot of work, but now I see. Just that technique you showed us with going around a circle, and I can imagine shapes.
Yeah, then when you start getting into stuff that does this, it gets intricate, but I still like to do it.
The patience and the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I have a few questions for you, Cory. Cory, what inspires you to do your artwork? I know you do. This is just one style of art that you do. I know you do beading, and I know you do other types of native art. What inspires you?
I think the main thing that really inspires me is that I choose to dance at powwows. I've always danced. I've been dancing since I was 6 years old. And I have really fond memories of being young and helping my mom. And it was my job to pin on like every single one of these little fringes. It was my job to pin that on. So I was always given like little jobs of what to do. And because even my dad would help. My dad would sit there and if you ever seen grass dancers and the yarn that they wear on like the older style grass dance outfits, he was the one who put half the yarn on my brother's stuff. So it's really a family thing that I am happy to share with my own children. So I don't look at it as where's your inspiration come from? It's it's always been there. It's we're really artistic people. My grandmother was an artist. My mom tried her best. She did not like sewing, but she made sure that we knew how to do certain things and made sure that we looked nice when we went out. So I always remember that. And I know if she was alive today, she would be so excited that I was the one who picked this up, because not many of the other people in my family still sew. It's not something that you see very often with young people anymore. So the fact that I really learned how to sew in my 20s. It's like, I'm really proud of that fact. I was like, okay, like, this is something that I can do, that I can teach, that I can show. And I think that gives me the most pleasure and inspiration and make me want to do more.
I know not only do you've learned how to do this, but you also share your talents with others. I remember you coming and doing lessons with when we had like your craft day.
Yeah.
So you share it with others, and that's excellent, because I think that's what's so hard. So many of our tribal citizens want to do different types of regalia, but they don't know how, and they don't know where to get that information. So that's wonderful that you share that, Cory. Do you have any certain specific piece that you've made that you really, something that's really important to you?
I think my first fancy dance regalia that I made way back when I was probably 14 was one of the first times that I was super proud of the work that I did. Like, I can still see it. Like, it's just ingrained in my mind. And it was all black. I had designed it, and I went in with my mom and I picked out the fabric, which is not usually something my mom would bring the fabric home. Okay, well, why don't you, how do you think about this? And when you're a teenager and you get in your own set of, your own mindset of what you really want, and that showed really fast for me. And it was just half black and white, and I finished it not 10 minutes before grand entry. And my mom parked the car on the outside, and I ran up and I just made the end of grand entry. And I remember my cousins going, "Oh my God, that's beautiful." Like, who made that? And I was like, me and my mom and Aunt Linda did. And I just felt so proud of it, and I felt so good dancing in it. And that's one of the things that I really remember. I am really proud of a lot of the recent work I did. Like, I have a big picture of me and all my children and my husband Yuri, and we're all wearing almost, like, I made something for each and every single one of them, and that's just a really proud moment for me, because they all look so good and they appreciate it, and I love watching them dance in it and travel places, and other people tell me how nice it looks. It's just a really nice thing.
And your family, all of you dance and participate in powwows and dance. You want to tell us a little bit about how many you family, or you have your husband?
Yes, I have my husband. He has 3 kids from his previous marriage, and we have 4 kids together. All of us dance, and some of them sing more. We all travel. We all have traveled. Even the older ones, they traveled all their life. These young ones, right in their footsteps, traveling to all these different powwows. It's really important, because it's not just powwows we go to ceremonies. I try to teach them, or we try to teach them, what it is to be Nanny Cook, what it is to be Lenape. And it's just it's a special thing for us, just to make sure that our kids really appreciate the culture, they know the culture, and that they can share the culture. So I can talk to them and say, well, for example, if you look at a tattoo on my arm, they know that it's like, well, why do you have X's? I say, well, X's are Lenape for crossroads. This is crossroads. And then I tell them, okay, well, there's 12 bars going across. What's the significance of the number 12? Well, 12 levels of creation. So it's really like, every once in a while, you really look at some of the things that I make for myself and the things that I make for my family that has little hints of those facts in there. And I think that's one of the important ways to be able to keep your culture alive, and to make sure that you're putting your traditions in your regalia. Not just, well, this is pretty, I like the heart, I like the flowers. But when you really start breaking it down and learning about your own culture and what different symbolisms are for you and your people, and then being able to put that into your regalia, that's when it gets really interesting and really fun.
Has there been anyone that has influenced you in your regalia making and appliqué?
A lot of it's a lot of people. A lot of the dancers I like to watch dance. I remember Verna Street. She was like, she didn't know who I was, but as it turns out, she knew one of my cousins really well, grew up with them, and we got to talking, and she picked up my shawl, and I know she probably doesn't even remember this, but she picked up my shawl and said, this is too heavy. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, no, it's like this, what are you using? And I told her what I was using, and that's when she said, you got to use the heat and bond. She's like, no, you don't use the heat and bond, use the Wonder Under, it's lighter. It's like, and how you're doing this, make sure, like, start doing it this way. And it really got me thinking about, well, how do I do this? And then I talked to my husband Yuri, who's an engineer, and he's like, well, okay, well, let's think about the dynamics of this, and trying to come up with a style that is lightweight, that moves well, almost like exercise wear, but still be out there and look nice and be bright and colorful and follow traditions. And it's really fun trying to figure out how to make that work. So if I had, like, I know my mom was a big influence, Barbara Miller, Verna Street, my Aunt Linda, who would come over every single time when the machine stopped working and fix it for us. Pretty much all my aunties I grew up with, all of them made sure that I look right, and if I need anything, they were there for me. And growing up and seeing, like, their beautiful beadwork and their beautiful regalia, it's like, oh, wow, I want to be able to do that. And now they come to me and they ask me to make their stuff. That's when it really hits that it's like, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Now, I know that you design regalia for tribal citizens, so if people are interested in a regalia, you do that also?
Yeah, I do that also. It's like, I'm not just our tribal citizens, but I've been up to Mashpee and done some regalias for some tribal members up there, some different tribal people out of Virginia. I actually did 2 outfits for a family out in Arizona, so it's really nice. It's really nice being like, and you kind of learn a little bit about them and a little bit about what they like, and design from there.
And you do both female and male regalias too, both, and children as well. Very good. Okay. Do you have any struggles that you can think of that you face just trying to create and be an artist?
One of the biggest issues that I feel like most people who make art in general is pricing. It's important to know your worth when you're doing this, because a lot of people don't want to pay for it. that's I don't know if that's a nice way to say it, but as you can see what I'm doing, you can see how much time and how much energy goes into it. Not just the sketching and the drawing, but the material, like finding out, like, okay, well, it's like, I don't like this white, I want a different pure white, I want an eggshell, I don't like this yellow. And all that time and effort that goes into that, all like finding out how much your time is worth. A lot of people who are starting out making regalia, they really don't know how much to charge, or how much they should, or like how much they should be charging, how much material they should be getting. So everything that deals with pricing in beadwork and regalia, that's the hardest thing that I've come by. I still have issues with it now. It's like, well, it's like, what are you charging for? Well, you're not just charging for your material and the time on your sewing machine, and it's also, you're charging for your expertise, you're charging for the time away from your family, you're charging for the time away from your work. So when you go to powwows and you ask someone for a regalia, or you see beadwork and you ask how much it is, and you say, oh, that's an astronomical price. Well, that's actually really hurtful, because most of the time they don't know everything that went into it. You don't know what was going on in their life at that point, and how hard it was for them to put the time, and how late they had to stay up to make sure they got things done. So if you're just starting out, remember, just like, you have a worth. Your time is worth what you believe your time is worth. Make sure that you're charging enough that you're getting something out of it. So if you just want to help people out, that's perfectly fine. And that's what I did for the first 7 years that I was sewing. Just I wanted to hone my craft before I even took an order as far as a business. But if you have a business and you're planning on running it as a business, run it as a business. Do your pricing well. Figure out how much you want to charge for your time and your materials, and just think about it. And really sit down and have a honest discussion with yourself about whether you're doing this just for fun or if you're doing this for business. And that was probably the hardest thing for me to learn. Like, how do I make this into a business? How do I start out with art? Because it's not like most businesses, but you kind of have to think of it as a quote unquote normal business that doesn't deal with the arts.
And what are some other pieces that you make? I know you do beaded earrings.
I do the minimal beading. Fun fact, I am not very good. I can make moccasins. My edge beading's all right. This is home for me. I don't really do fan work or feather work yet. I'm just starting to get comfortable with quill work, but this is where I started off, and this is where I'm happiest at. I'll make stuff for me and my family, but as far as this is concerned, this is it. This is what I like to do the most.
Do you have any upcoming events that you're going to? Any powwows that you're going to be going to?
Oh yeah, well, let's see. This weekend we're going to the Delaware Arts Museum. Yeah, it's right in Wilmington. They're having a one-day on Saturday. Let's see. There's also the Nanticoke Powwow the weekend after Labor Day down in Millsboro, Delaware. We always go there because that's my home community. I've never missed a year. It's forever. We have a couple different powwows in Virginia. We're talking about going down to Chickahominy. We just got back from Mashpee Powwow. We're going to be going up to Bear Mountain in New York I think that's the first week in August. Definitely Google it. But there's lots of different events around, lots of different powwows around. And if you've never been to a powwow, make sure you go, check it out, and you're going to see so much more of this, and even better than the way that I make it. It's just a really wonderful event. So make sure you go out and try to catch seeing dancing and all the regalia and all the beautiful art that Native people have to share.
Cory, I know that you also were the tribal artist of the month for the Nanticoke, Lenni Lenape Turtle Trading Post
Yes.
at 18 Thomas Street, Boston. I want to thank you for that. Beautiful work.
Thank you.
And again, we are at the end of our session, so I want to thank you for coming and sharing your talents with us. It's a beautiful work, and next time anyone goes to the powwow, please make sure that you look at the appliques and think about what Cory showed us today and about the amount of work that tribal artists do put into their regalias. And Cory, you do excellent work. If anybody would like any pieces, please make sure you get a hold of Cory. And if you can't get a hold of us, please check us out at NLLT Native Power Hour, and we can hook you up with Cory so you can get some regalia. All right, Cory, thank you.
Thank you.
Cory, the piece with the blue and the orange, what are those pieces? What are they used for?
These are cuffs.
Cuffs, okay. And the red and white and black piece that you're doing for us is going to be
That's going to go on an apron.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Tribal Nations Native Power Hour, Appliqué with Cory. The Native Power Hour has been made possible by a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, Sustaining Humanities through the American Rescue Plan, in partnership with the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and catch our next episode with the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Tribal Nations Summer Youth Camp 2022. And again, my name is Linda Little Bright Star Jackson, and I will see you next time on the Native Power Hour. Wanishi.